Well, hello, good morning everyone, and welcome to the July 2021 board meeting of the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, held in public. My name is Stephen Lightfoot and I'm the chair of the board, and my role is to lead us today through the agenda. So for those of you who've not attended one of our meetings before, I must start by saying that this is a board meeting held in public and it is not a public meeting. Having said that, we will provide the opportunity for members of the public to ask questions at the end of the meeting. I think it's also important just to set the context and explain that our board is responsible for the strategic leadership of the agency, and it does not make regulatory decisions on individual products, as that's done by the officials within the agency with the advice of our independent expert committees. I also need to make you aware that we'll be recording the meeting today. And that so that we can publish it on our website to provide the opportunity for as many people to observe the meeting as possible. Now, I'm delighted to say that 54 people have registered to observe our meeting live, with 12 people representing patients or patient groups. We've got 15 people from industry, with 18 of our own staff, 6 health professionals and 3 representatives from the media. So thank you to each and every one of you for making the time to join us today. Now, as far as the agenda is concerned, after discussing the current issues and the agency performance with our Chief Executive and Chief Operating Officer, we'll focus the agenda around 3 of our strategic goals of the agency. And that's first of all around patient safety, secondly around dynamic organisation, and then thirdly around financial sustainability. We'll use the board pack of papers for reference, and I will assume that everyone has read the papers so that we can spend most of our time on discussion, asking questions and debating the topics in hand. And I'll use the page numbers in the board pack to help to keep us all on track. Now, as the board works the way through the agenda, members of the audience can ask questions through the chat function on Zoom, and our Director of Communications, Rachel Bosworth, will collate these questions and we'll answer as many of them as we can in the question and answer session at the end of the meeting. So Rachel, can you just give us a wave so that we can all see who you are? Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. I'd also like to welcome my other board colleagues to everyone online. So first of all, we've got Dr. June Rain, our Chief Executive. June, just give us a wave.
Good morning, everyone.
We've got Dr. Sam Atkinson, our Chief Quality and Access Officer. We've got John Fundry, our Chief Operating Officer. We've got John Quinn, our Chief Technology Officer. And I'm also particularly pleased to welcome Dr. Alison Cave, our newly appointed Chief Safety Officer, who joined the agency only yesterday. And so this is actually her second day in the role. Now, Alison brings a real wealth of regulatory and academic experience, having worked for UK Research and Innovation, the European Medicines Agency, and the MHRA, among a number of other organisations that she's also worked for. So Alison, a very warm welcome to you. And I think we should just record our warm welcome in the minutes as well, please, Natalie, as well. So good to have you on board.
Thank you very much.
We've also got our independent non-executive directors present today. So we've got Dr. Barbara Bannister. So we've got Mandy Calvert. Give us a wave, Mandy, that's great. Professor Bruce Campbell. We've got Mercy Jessingham. We've got Anthony Rogers. We've got Professor David Webb.
Good morning.
And we've got Michael Whitehouse.
Good morning.
So we're also joined on screen today by Dr. Mark Bailey. Mark is our Interim Director of the National Institute of Biological Standards and Controls, and Mark's here today to provide scientific input into our board discussions, as unfortunately Dr. Christian Schneider, our Chief Scientific Officer, has left the agency for family reasons. However, I would like to take this opportunity to formally thank Christian for his contribution and expertise over the last 5 years, and as an agency we've really benefited from that, and to wish him every success, both for him and his family in the future. So again, I think, Natalie, if we can just record that in the minutes, that will be excellent. I'm very pleased also to welcome Catherine Glover, who's our Deputy Director for Medicines Regulation and Prescribing at the Department of Health. Morning, Catherine. I'm hoping that we'll also be joined by Professor Alison Strath, the Chief Pharmaceutical Officer from Scotland. And then last by no means least, we've got Carly McGurry, our Director of Governance, Natalie Richards, our Head of Directorate, and who's taking the minutes, as well as June, Sash and Patrick working behind the scenes to make the meeting happen. So from my point of view, that's the introductions over. Hopefully I've not missed anybody, but can I just check if I have? Is that okay? Excellent. Okay, I'll take silence as consent then. That's great. Yeah, thank you, Alison. That's great. I realise you're now here. Perfect. Okay, so with that being the case, they're the priorities, and that's the first item on the agenda. Can I just first of all check if there are any apologies? The apologies I'm aware of for not being able to be here today is Greg Chalmers from the Scottish Government and Cathy Harrison, who unfortunately was unable to join at short notice this morning. They're the apologies I've got. I think everyone else is here. So have we got any new declarations of interest? I think, Bruce, I think you've got one declaration of interest you want to make.
I have indeed. I've been approached by a company called Origin Sciences to advise them specifically about adoption issues for a new technology for diagnosis of colonic cancer and possibly other cancers. Having informed the chair, I attended a scientific meeting about this work 2 weeks ago, and I now await any formal arrangement with them. If that's forthcoming, my work will be remunerated. Please note this declaration is in the context of today being my last attendance as a non-executive member of the board at a meeting in public.
Yeah, okay, that's excellent, Bruce. As you rightly say, you and I discussed that. And I think particularly bear in mind that this is your last meeting. There's no conflict with any of the items on this agenda. And so therefore I was satisfied that there is no conflict of interest here that causes any issues or concerns. So again, I think if we can just formally record that in the minutes again, Natalie, to show that due process has been followed. Were there any other declarations of interest from anybody else? No? Okay, that's great. Thank you for that. If we can then just move on to the minutes of the last meeting, that's on page 2 of the pack. Can I just first of all just check that they're a true and accurate record of the last meeting? Again, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I will take that as consent. So if we could therefore just formally approve the minutes as a true record of the last meeting, and then just move on to the actions, please, which is actually on page number 8. So just looking through the actions, I'll just focus on the items that are in red that are due today. So the first item, number 21, we'll partly pick that up, I think, in your report, Michael, later on in the agenda. I know that there's been an initial meeting with the Patient Safety Engagement Committee. I know that's not formally part of your meeting, but we can maybe just pick that up at that point then, please. Number 22, we've got that on the agenda about the long-term, short and medium-term deliverables from the Cumberland review. That's on the agenda, so we'll discuss that then, as is the report on diversity and inclusion and the Organisational Development Remuneration Committee reports. So they're on the agenda too. If we look at item number 36, we've got the promotion, the NICE accreditation of the MHRA drug safety update. This is something that we actually talked about back in May. So Rachel, can you just confirm that that's now been completed?
Yes, it's an ongoing process, Stephen. We received NICE accreditation in 2010, actually, and right. It's regularly promoted, including on every bulletin that we send out for drug safety update, and will continue to do so. Okay, so I think we can, on that basis, I think close that item. But thank you for that. That's great. The balanced scorecard is on the agenda shortly, so we'll discuss that then. Again, I think in terms of item number 38, the joint meeting between the Patient Safety Engagement Committee and the Audit and Risk Assurance Committee was delayed until Friday. The meetings happened, and I think the intention, Mercy, is to cover more output of that meeting in the next meeting, from your assurance portal in September. You're nodding, so I think that's fine on that. The next item was around item number 41. Which is holding a briefing on Cprd accounting. I'm pleased to say that that happened last week. Michael and I attended that, so thank you for organising that, John. There was a correction in the final version of the Cprd financial statements following the external audit compared to what we saw last week. Is there anything you just care to share with the board, John, just to sort of update everybody on the changes that were made around the balance sheet and then the amount of money available?
So we've slightly, after input from the auditors, Stephen, refined the disclosure in the notes to the accounts on Cprd, not in the main accounts themselves. I think we're generally agreed that actually it makes it clearer, and it's easier to see the share of Cprd funds in the accounts now, so I think it's beneficial. And I'm sure Michael will pick that up later in his assurance report.
Yeah, no, I think it's helpful to have that meeting. I think it sort of clarified a number of points for me. So thank you to you and the team for organising that. Item number 42, we talked about the financial accounts at the last meeting. Michael, we delegated responsibility to you to work with the auditors and the team to basically enable the chief executive to sign them off. Can you confirm that's been done?
Yes, Stephen, as requested, I circulated a note to the board last week. The Controller and Auditor General certified the accounts, I believe, on Friday afternoon, and they are due to be laid in the House of Commons this morning or this afternoon. So the agency has met its statutory responsibilities regarding submitting unqualified financial accounts and supporting annual report to Parliament.
And from your point of view, there was no material changes from what we saw last month?
No, the primary statements that the board saw last month remain unchanged. There was some change to the notes to the account, which you've referred to in relation to Cprd, but it had no material impact on the financial statements of the MHRA.
Okay. Anthony, were you wanting to come in?
Yeah, apologies. I don't have a hand raising button. I don't know if anybody else does, but you might have to look out for people waving at you, Stephen.
That's okay. Thank you for that.
I just wanted to say I'm really pleased to hear this, because this has been one of those ongoing issues as the lead for Cprd that's really challenged me, that we kept seeing Cprd looking as if it was in a negative position when we knew that actually it had turned into profitability. So thank you for resolving that issue. As it's my last meeting, I'm really pleased to see that one put to bed. So well done, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. That's helpful. Also then on item 44, it's related, but again, it's on the annual report, and there was the governance statement specifically, Michael, which we delegated responsibility to you to advise June to be able to sign off that. Again, you sent the note round last week. That has been done, as I understand it.
Yes, indeed. Yes, sorry.
Okay, that's great. Obviously, in terms of item 45, the report's now been submitted, but Rachel, can you just confirm that you took into account any updates you provided?
Yes, absolutely. That's all complete now.
That's great. Okay, we can strike that one off the list. In terms of item number 47, there was a question from the public actually about a particular product, which we agreed that there would be a sort of a personal reply sent. Sam, can you just confirm, or Rachel, that that was actually done?
Yeah, it was indeed, Chair.
That's great. Thank you very much. We can complete that. And then item number 48 was just around the summary of impact of COVID-19 vaccines in pregnant women. Again, that was a sort of result of a question that was raised during the question and answer session last time. Rachel, can you just confirm that that's also been incorporated into one of our updates?
Yes, indeed. And we'll be updated regularly if there is further advice to give. So it'll be updated in the weekly ADR reports as a matter of course. Yeah,
I think that's the point, isn't it? There is a weekly report that's actually published online, so we have the opportunity to keep that information up to date.
Yes,
so,
indeed.
That's great. Okay, well, thank you very much. So there were all the formal actions. I think we're very much on track with those. Was there any other matters arising from the last meeting that we've not already covered? No? Okay. On that basis then, let's move on to the first substantive item on the agenda, and this is actually the report from the Chief Executive, Dr. June Rain, about the current key issues from the CEO's point of view. So, June, you can assume we've read the paper, but are there any key points you want to draw to our attention? And that's from page 10 in the board pack.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Stephen. I think, as you say, everyone's read the paper. There are a whole range of important priorities, and what a busy time it is for the agency. Patient safety, of course, is our top priority, and I think it's a major milestone that the delivery plan published on the 2nd of July has an objective for every member of staff to deliver better patient and public involvement to ensure we put patients first. And our consultation on public involvement has had a great response, and that will help us interpret for members of staff how that important objective can be factored into their own work. Case work continues, as you can see, and perhaps to highlight that we've taken a major step in our safety review of isotretinoin in the acne medicine to start involving patients directly in the safety review. It began last week, it's ongoing this week, and it's proving to be tremendously valuable. Another very rapid investigation for devices was into the lateral flow test manufactured by Innova, and that was turned around in 2 or 3 days. And I think it's important to share with the board that this rapid safety response is actually part of our daily working. The focus on healthcare access, of course, is going to come up both in this report and in our balanced scorecard. So far, 42 applications for the innovative licensing and access pathway. So things like the gene therapy for sickle cell disease, it's really important that we give these a rocket boost with our new pathway. The vaccine batch approvals, the batch testing by NIBS, is still at full throttle. I think we're approaching the number of batches that equates to 100 million doses. And that's such an assurance for the public, and an access commitment is made. Safe access is key to that. The other thing I think to highlight is how we're making better use of real world evidence with the commitment now through the Cprd Sprint service to help support rapid patient recruitment. So these are just some of the current issues in the midst of business normal as usual work that we're driving forward. Of course, none of it would happen without our staff. And just to finish off by saying our transformation programme again has stepped up a gear since the board last month on the 15th of June endorsed the set of proposals and the affordability was put together. We've now got champions, transformation champions, 60 across the agency have come together to help have that engagement that everyone in the agency can be part of. Importantly, our governance office was launched. Really pleased that now that whole configuration, the first step on our transformation, brings together the staff who work on corporate governance, who support our committees, including the board and the executive, and also risk. So there's a really nice feeling of completion, as I know this is a pretty landmark meeting for many of the non-execs. So patient safety, number one, healthcare access, we're driving to optimise, and of course the efforts and commitment of our staff are what makes it happen. So very much a positive report as we reach this milestone for our board. Thank you, Stephen.
Well, that's great, June, and I think actually, we should again just record our continuing thanks and gratitude to all the members of our staff, because actually, there's so many achievements within this. There's so many good things that are going on, and we have to do this at a time of change, which is not easy. So I think let's just say thank you to all of our staff and everyone who's been involved in all these many components. So Bruce, I see you do have a virtual hand. Can I just come to you first, and I'll then come to Anthony?
Yeah, just two brief questions about items 13 and 14 on pages 3 and 4. Regarding item 13, I'm always going on about the agency publicising in the scientific literature things it's done. When I hear you've had a workshop entitled A UK COVID Story, and I just wondered whether there were plans to expand the fruits of this workshop into a well-published piece to show how it's working in the UK. And that's my first question and comment. My second question is about items 14 and 15, which you've got the access collaboration, which we all understand. And then Project Orbis, which includes all of the access collaboration, but it's coordinated by the FDA and with Brazil bolted on. I just wondered about the sort of history of what the FDA role is in this, and whether this sort of somehow was a signal of a wider regulation and collaboration in general. And I wondered if June could comment about that.
Okay. So two good questions there. June, do you want to take the...
Really good. And I'm really pleased that, Bruce, you've highlighted the importance of contributing to the published literature so that the achievements and particularly the strategic direction that we're taking is becoming much better known, supported and indeed embedded. I don't know actually if this particular workshop is leading to publications. What I do know is that there are a number in the pipeline, in particular around Cprd, but I'll take that as a very good nudge and make sure that we do contribute to anything that this NIHR-led workshop is planning. And I think there'll be a really positive reception with such a good story to tell. Perhaps turning then to Project Orbis. there is quite a history there because of the FDA's commitment to oncology. They have a cadre of, I think, 100 consultant oncologists or thereabouts, and so have been able historically to take quite a leading role in this specialism. And I think as we talk about our international strategy this afternoon, part of it is hitching our wagon to where there are other critical mass expertise regulators. It has grown over the period of time that FDA have put their energy into this, and therefore it is a way for us to, particularly in the space of oncology, assure wide access. Apraisal came through as our first, osimertinib, and we're looking to the other agents that you see in the report today. So there is quite a long history, but I think it shows that when we've got a proof of concept, we will indeed profit from that, and not only link with access, but clearly the ILAP products, about a third of them, it's 9 at least so far, will benefit from that leadership that the FDA has put into this critical area. So I think it's a case of building on the best, but always, I think, with the Access Consortium, looking to see what our own unique leadership role can be, always putting the patient first.
Okay, does that help, Bruce? So I think Orbis is very oncology specific, but I think the principle of collaboration with international partners is very well founded and something that will be a key part of the way we operate in the future. So, okay, that's great. Anthony, I promised to come to you next.
Yeah, I was interested in the ILAP because it's great to see that things are moving forward, but this is a novel process that we've set up and we're working on. And I wondered if somebody, June or Sam, I'm not sure who, could comment on how the new mechanisms of team working are going, because we're pulling in people from different teams who perhaps didn't work together before. And also if there's any opportunities for improvement in this area that have been noted already, particularly as we're entering the phase of reorganisation within the agency.
June,
Shall I kick off, Stephen, and then if Sam would like to come in? Really important to focus on those two things, how a team is built from different organisations and then areas for improvement. The team building had a really important running start because of the work on COVID. An organisation, Rapid C19, effectively had the same constituencies of regulator, health technology assessment and NHS, the three main ingredients. And so it's been a natural fit and we've built from that. Always more to do with team working that I think we can optimise, and that takes to the second area, what areas for improvement. I think if I had a first top priority for that is gearing timelines. We've had to look at the different processes and procedures and then gear timelines so that in the end you hit the same sweet spot of a regulatory approval, an HTA, green light, and the NHS ready at the same time. Now it can be done, sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect, but I think our work plan with NICE is the vehicle to actually hit that sweet spot. So that's my top priority at the moment, is gearing the different constituency procedures into that optimal delivery. But obviously Sam might like to come in, Stephen.
Yeah, Sam, on the paper we had at the last board meeting actually. So, but anything else you want to add, Sam?
Yeah, if I may. So, I mean, I think June's right around the team working. There's both the cross-system team working, which of course is crucial to this, and we're obviously exploring relationships with Wales now as well, and that is working really well. We're learning from what we've done with obviously SMC and NICE and taking that forward with our Welsh colleagues. And there's still quite a lot of work ongoing in terms of really identifying how we work together, because there's a lot. It's a multifaceted approach, as I'm sure you can imagine, with, as June rightly says, a timeline which we all need to operate to and understand where decision points are, but equally where our input comes in and how we manage all of that really cohesively. So that's a piece of work that's still ongoing, and to be honest, because this is still quite a new process, it's very much an evolving picture that will improve as time goes on. And then, of course, there's the internal team working, which is working incredibly effectively. Again, from what June said, the COVID really set us up very well to do that. I think actually a lot of those siloed walls that we perhaps had previously are dissipating somewhat, and we're actually getting a lot more collaborative working across the organisation, and size and shape is only going to actually improve on that, and we're already seeing that at the moment. And I think just going forward in terms of opportunities for improvement, I mean, I mentioned it's an evolving picture, and what we're trying to do is also understand our impact, both the system-wide and internal impact in terms of where a product might come through to the innovation passport and indeed go through to the TDP, and why they're not getting through, importantly, and if there's anything we can do from that. So there's lots of different elements we're looking at. I hope that gives you a flavour, Chair.
Yeah, that's great. And Anthony, I think that really shows the breadth of the operation here. So in terms of looking cross-system, internal cross functions, and then obviously how we feel continuous improvement.
Yeah, I do feel assured, because I think for me that was one of the potential challenges, and perhaps it's something we need to watch as we move back into an office environment, that people don't fall back into those silos because they're sitting in silos and things, you know.
So, okay, great, thank you very much. Mercy, can I come to you next, please?
Yeah, thank you. It was just a comment really on 27 about the unique device identifier and trying to mandate this, and especially welcome the point of making that registry data transparent to patients and the public. So that would be really great. So I'm glad that we're picking up on these things and mandating them if they're just not happening naturally. So well done on that.
Okay, June, do you want to come back on that?
Well, I think it's hitting on a really important issue if we're to strengthen our ability to monitor the safety of medical devices, and that linkage, whether we need to mandate, is going to be vital. I think the uptake in the registration submissions of unique device identifiers has been a warning sign, and that we need to really drive that. And in particular, and I know it's something that Alison feels really strongly about, we need to make sure that the clinical record also contains the unique device identifier, so we can link everything together. We've got the opportunity of the Medicines and Medical Devices Act, and if we have to take the step of mandating some of these key linkages, we will do that. So it's a finger on the pulse at the moment of how well the registration's running, but because the UDI truly is a deal breaker, it's a showstopper, we really need to nail it now.
Okay. I think that's very clear. So thank you, June. Mandy, can I come to you, please?
Thanks, Stephen. Yes, that was one of the points I was going to make around the UDI and making sure we do have the resources, both in terms of people, finance, and sort of statutory authority to do that, because I was quite shocked by that low number. So making sure we do, maybe we need to understand as a board what the implications are for the organisation around that. And the other question and comment I had was around the clinical CPRD and clinical trials, and I think really positive around identifying and getting more people into clinical trial using the CPRD data. But a couple of questions on that. The speed of recruitment, is that sufficient to make it attractive? And can we speed it up? Because it seemed quite slow to me, first 6 of 3,000 patients in a month. And the other thing is, again, how are we financing that really vital service, which has a huge impact for CROs and for pharma industry. Yeah. So are we going quick enough, and are we resourcing adequately, and are we charging enough?
June.
It is a good call. It is a new service. I agree that didn't seem, if you like, a stunning first report there, but I do believe that once the sprint is in full function, that actually it will be much quicker. I do know that at the other end of the spectrum, when we were looking in the context of the Accelerated Access Collaborative at patients who could have benefited from a particular drug, hadn't yet got it, that was done very quickly. So I think for the right studies, Sprint will live up to its name, and that it will be able to identify research suitable patients very quickly. In terms of charging, I would need to look into that a bit further. I believe it is commercially attractive, but there's nothing quite like making it more attractive through showing that it delivers, because for all these commercial studies, time is money. Time is everything. And I think that given that we've driven up well beyond 25% of the GP population, we're now looking at a real going concern for rapid trial initiation. We're working closely with the Health Research Authority and now with MHRA to pull together this package that makes a uniquely attractive environment. It's a good call. Perhaps we can come back in a month or two with some really impressive figures with the 2 contracts that have just been signed.
Okay, thanks, Jean.
Yeah, I think we should maybe just record that as an action, actually, because I think it would be useful to have a follow-up, because I think actually just understanding whether this is going to fit into the fees work will be one question, and then also in terms of, you know, are we actually accelerating the process with experience? You know, I think, you know, ILAP was a new process. Well, this is also a new process, and I think it should evolve and improve over time. But I think if we can maybe in, say, 2 months have a review just to see how that is going, that would be helpful.
Yes, and Stephen, if I could just add something, through G7, we're beginning to have more and wider opportunities to showcase availability. It's not the overt reason. We've just agreed with the International Coalition of Medicines Regulatory Authorities to a working group on clinical trials. Yeah. And clearly the principle of rapid uptake is there, and CPRD is a resource for the world. It's not simply for the UK PLC. So I think we're creating opportunities. What Mandy's point tells us is we've got to have the delivery of the service.
Okay, and David, can I bring you in now? Bear in mind that you're actually running a clinical trial as we speak.
I am doing a first in human study as we speak. No, I really wanted to just say that I'm very impressed as well on Mandy's point that we're now starting to use CPRD in a different way for clinical trials. That is very exciting. I know the commercial pressures, that clearly is pretty slow. And 61 general practices, well, that's the number of general practices in Edinburgh. So it's a small number. And my question is a different one. My question is it possible to sign up general practices to research in a broader way, or do we have to sign up each one each time for individual research studies? Because if you could get a generic agreement from practices to engage in research, then that would simplify and speed things up and would provide much better access. That hasn't been possible in Scotland. I just hope it might be possible with CPRD.
Well, Stephen, that's a great idea. I think through COVID, we focused a lot on the research readiness of the NHS, particularly hospital studies, platform studies. But I think if we can create that in the community, it will be uniquely valuable. So perhaps that can be part of our follow-up. Yeah. At the moment, we're part of a task force looking at delivering antivirals for patients with COVID, people with COVID who've just got their positive test and they're perhaps even pre-symptomatic. So creating community-based ready setup trials is going to be incredibly valuable. So let's look into the dynamics of that with Janet Valentine and colleagues and just see what we might start to build, because it will be extremely important.
Yeah. Anthony, I know you've been involved with CPRD. Is there anything you want to add quickly? Then I'll come to Barbara.
Say 2 things. One of the challenges has been the contracting side, because obviously it's a new approach for industry and for the agency, and that's got faster. So I know they've got several other contracts in the pipeline. So if you're looking at this review, I think it's important not just to look at it from our perspective, but also from the people we're working with, the challenges they face, and whether we can also then template some of those activities, because otherwise we spend a lot of time and agency time with the lawyers, finance, etc., on topics that probably don't really warrant that much time and resource. We could be a lot quicker there. So I just add that into your review if I were you.
Yeah, no, I think that's very helpful, actually. Thank you, Anthony. And Barbara, can I come to you?
Yes, I just wanted to ask, there are so many steps in arranging research at the moment. Is it that we have to have a better process for engaging with partners and collaborators in actually providing the service? Is it something to do with tech? And when we have our tech a bit better sorted, we can respond more quickly? And is it something to do with having the right staff?
It's probably a combination, isn't it, June?
Probably is multifactorial. I've already mentioned that we have a well-established partnership with the Health Research Authority, and NIHR has come on board, kicked off workshop, so that we can start to look at the journey that a developer takes to make it extremely simple, that we have almost, if you like, a common area of one protocol would suit multiple needs with add-ons as necessary. It's working well with the Common Ways of Working pilot, and you're right, the Health Research Agency and ourselves are building a technology support for that has a very simple and smooth passage for a researcher. But and John Quinn knows all about how that will be finally finished and delivered very, very imminently. But there is more to do, and I think what one can see is that the teams involved have really a very common approach to things, how we can then smooth that with a one team approach, a bit like ILAP, but before, at the front end. That will make life very, very much simpler. It's only when you plot the journey of a developer that you realise how complex the landscape is at the moment. And we've got to use every approach to making it as simple and smooth as possible.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, I think that's very insightful, Barbara, actually, to be honest, but I think it does demonstrate the multifactorial approach that's required here. I think there's some good learnings to be made from ILAP, but I think, I think maybe it is around actually, how we're going to utilise this wonderful asset of CPRD to genuinely accelerate clinical trial recruitment here in the UK. It's got to be part of the longer term solution to make UK an attractive place for clinical development in the life sciences sector. So we've got an important role to play, and I think we should review that. We can talk offline on the timing, but I think it's maybe becoming a little bigger than just a CPRD process review. Maybe it needs to be a little bit wider in the clinical trials context as well, June. So, but in the next 2 to 3 months, we'll come back on that, and we'll talk offline about defining the paper that's required. Okay, so I think on that basis, can we note June's report with great thanks and the one follow-up action on CPRD in clinical trials. Okay, that's great. So moving on to the next item, which is the balanced scorecard. So John, obviously, page number 17. You can assume we've read it, but are there any key points you want to raise, and then we can go to questions.
Thanks, Stephen, and good morning, everyone. So primarily for the benefit of new attendees to the board, previous attendees will be aware that we've been developing the balanced scorecard for some time to help provide information to assure the board and our performance, both as a regulator and as an agency, and track our processes in key areas. This is the first time we've tabled the live version rather than a pro forma. We've slightly tweaked Kaplan and Norton's traditional 4 quadrants, which focused on financial, customer, internal processes, learning and growth. We've used the 6 themes from our delivery plan. So scientific innovation, healthcare access, patient safety, dynamic organisation, financial sustainability, and collaborative partnerships are the 6 dimensions that we've got in the scorecard. The full scorecard is quarterly. This is a monthly update. So, and some metrics are still under development, including targets for each item. Paragraph 3.7 of the paper shows the full list and the frequency of reporting. You've got the commentary already in section 3. A couple of points to emphasise. As we've just been saying, good progress on clinical trials. We track that under scientific innovation, but arguably it contributes to other areas right the way across the agency. ILAP we've also been talking about, which we launched at the start of this year. That's currently running above our expectations. And in the safety dimension, we're seeing a huge jump in ADRs, adverse drug reactions, primarily because of vaccines. Colleagues in our safety area say that each time June is on the news or on a number 10 performance and mentions the yellow card, we literally get 10,000 filed within the next hour. So part of the success actually is the promotion that we're actually giving it through this. So finally, before we turn to comments or questions, this is month 1 of the scorecard. We know it's not perfect, but the experience elsewhere is start using it and refine it as we go. So I think the intention is to let at least a quarterly cycle go through before we make major revisions to it. And in the interim, we'll be doing more work on targets, which we need to give some measure in the scorecard. So happy to take comments or questions, Stephen.
Well, thank you, John. It was a very clear decision from the board that we would expect an iterative approach to this, that it wouldn't be perfect, but it was really, really important that we start presenting the data. And we'll see the full quarterly paper in the September board meeting. So that's very much the plan. So can I just ask if there are any specific questions? Because what the board question is the board, we're asked to confirm if this scorecard provides assurance that the current performance is on track and aligned to our strategic objectives. So Michael, can I come to you first, please?
Yes, I think this is really good and moving in the right direction. And I would 100% subscribe to what John is saying. You've got to start using it and it will evolve. The only caveat I would have is around financial sustainability. And I know we're going to get the quarter report in September, but if you look at financial sustainability, when we approve the financial plan, financial sustainability depends on 3 actions: realignment of our staffing base, our corporate overhead, and our digital investment. And I actually think making that progress on those 3 elements more explicit, certainly over the next 12 months, is quite important. Because at the moment, the indicator under financial sustainability just shows a positive trend. I'm sure that's where we'll get, but we are not out of the woods in that particular area yet. And the next 6 months are really critical in terms of progress. So I think I'd like a little bit more transparency about progress on those 3 elements, Stephen. But I think we go with this, and congratulations to John and his colleagues moving it forward. I think the narrative is important. I think that could be developed further, but I'm sure that will come.
Yeah, okay, I think that's helpful. And I think certainly as we become more sophisticated with this, looking at sort of a year-end forecast on finances is something that probably the Audit and Risk Assurance Committee should be looking at on a regular basis. Yeah. And that's how I think there's something around the forward look and not just the reporting of the history when it comes to financial performance in particular, when we're under a challenge. But okay, Catherine, can I bring you in?
Yes. Just 2 questions. One, building on the previous question, is about what more can be done to make sure this really gives us an insight into progress against the delivery plan. And the second one is just picking up the comment about ADR reporting. Are we seeing the COVID effect translating into ADRs of other medicines? Because that would be a really positive side effect of all MHRA's work if we could enhance safety monitoring in that way as a result.
Okay, so John, just come back to you on that one. In terms of the first question around insight against progress against the delivery plan, what are your intentions to report on the progress of the delivery plan, and how does this fit in with this?
Yeah, good point, Catherine. So we're currently undertaking a mapping exercise actually of comparing what we have in the balanced scorecard against each component of the delivery plan. We've completed that. Now the next thing is the slightly more difficult thing, which is actually how do we track and measure each aspect? Because actually the delivery plan is quite detailed and we want to try and keep it at a reasonably high level. So that work is underway.
I think certainly from previous experience in other organisations, Catherine, what I'd ideally like to see is that I think there needs to be the scorecard as the quantitative measures. And I think there'll still need to be a quarterly qualitative review of progress against the delivery plan as well, because I don't think that we can do everything just through the scorecard, because I think we'll miss some of the interpretation of progress. And so certainly in September, we're planning to have a quarterly report on the achievable, on the first set of deliverables for the delivery plan. So I think we will probably need two sort of reporting mechanisms to make sure we deal with that. The second question I think Catherine asked John was around ADRs. You're on mute, John.
Sorry, Stephen. I might need to defer to others on that. I'm kind of assuming that we are getting a kind of cross effect, but I don't know in detail, to be honest.
June, you're nodding. So
certainly, I think it's been a roughly doubling effect on the non-COVID therapeutical vaccine related reporting. And that's good because it means, as Catherine says, there's a much greater awareness of the need to report. Whether we can see it settling is a good question to look at again through the balanced scorecard. But certainly that greater awareness has translated across the piece. And we're really pleased about that, given that we've now got some improved technology capabilities, AI, for example, to take some of the labour out of capturing the data. So let's hope it's sustained and to find out what it is that people like about the system we have so we can go on improving it.
Yeah, and I think also the future safety monitoring, it cannot just be about yellow cards. Yeah, that is one of the components, but I think actually linkage with data sources from elsewhere within the health system is going to be vitally important too. So I think that it's not just about yellow cards. That's what the Safety Connect system will hopefully help to join some of these different data sources together. Michael, did you want to come back on a point that's raised after your first one, or was it a separate point? Oh, okay, it's an old hand, I take it. You're on mute, but okay, no worries. Bruce, can I come to you, please?
Yeah, just a couple of points about presentation. The first is I found the presentation of these graphs, the figures, very helpful. I have to say more helpful than I expected in terms of the way the graphs are presented, the trends and all of that. I think it's very good. The thing I would ask for my successors on the board is please, for goodness sake, with the board paper, put the comments in the same order as we get on the figures. Because at the moment, the last one came first and they were muddled. And I think it's just for the ease of reference. And the final thing, can I particularly endorse John's comments about very carefully looking at the targets? Having been involved in NHS policies and audits for decades, I've noticed these tend to appear plucked from thin air. And I think that they need a very sound basis. So I think very sound justification for the targets is extremely important.
Yeah, I'm sure John would agree with that. So, okay, David, come to you, please.
Yeah, hi, sorry. Am I unmuted?
You are.
Oh, good. Okay. So mine is just a small point, but I was a little confused by 3.6. I've always had in my head that MHRA comprises somewhere in the mid 1300s staff. And yet this says it's fallen by 1% to 1372, which would have meant it was up to 1500. So when was it planned to rise to 1500? Who were those people? What were they going to be doing? And so what are we not doing that we would otherwise have done? Because that seems a much larger number than I've ever heard cited before, 1500.
Okay. John, can you just shed some light on the headcount?
I think we might be struggling slightly on kind of arithmetic, actually. So I think 1% is 13.7.
Oh God, I'm sorry.
Sorry to be the bearer of bad news.
Oh, that's not good in public.
But broadly, we are tracking under what we budgeted for this year. Colleagues are probably aware that actually we've had largely had a recruitment freeze for a while, for the reasons of as we implement a new model, we need to be careful for colleagues that get displaced about closing down other opportunities. So that means the natural trend is downwards.
Okay, but to save some of David's blushes, actually, the budgeted headcount was 1,458. So that's not too far from 1,500, David, if you round it up.
Well, I was wondering where they've been lost from, or where they didn't get appointed to. That was the question, really. That those 1,400 rather than 1,300. It's around 100.
It's across the board, as far as I would understand it, John. You know, we've got.
It is across the borders. We have actually also gone up. We tend to call it surge resourcing. So clearly there is pressure currently in the vigilance area with ADRs. Actually, we are getting significant increases in terms of national applications. So we've increased both our customer service area and the initial information processing. So we've got about 40 or 50 additional resources covering peak activities at the moment.
Okay, great. Okay, Mandy, can I bring you
in? Thanks, Stephen. Yes, I wholly support what's been said before, particularly the comments on ADRs and also the let's start using the graphs and see where we go. I think one of the things, and maybe this is in targets, but at ODRC we've been trying to match activity with resourcing, or the other way around, understand the activity levels we have, and so that we're appropriately resourced. And although we've got some of those targets, those measures there, I would like as a board member to be assured that our resources are going on the right things to help us achieve our objectives, and understand how much is new, how much is coming through. And I'm not quite getting that feeling at the moment, that we're resourcing in the right places and that we're achieving, and where we've got things that, you know, clearly need more resource, like we talked about the UDI for medical devices, that I would expect that to come through in the balanced scorecard as well, so we can see where we need to take action. And I'm just thinking whether and maybe it's where we set the targets and where the priorities are, but that for a balanced scorecard, I would like to see that a little bit more obviously.
So John, how do you think in the future we can evolve the scorecard to take account of Mandy's point? Bear in mind, this is an assurance report, that we're effectively investing and resourcing in the right areas.
So I would hope that when we implement our new future operating model, that given the thought and consideration that, you know, broadly we are targeting the areas that we want to, and that there's been a conscious underpinning of areas we want to invest in, areas we want to have less emphasis on. The other aspect, which I think may hopefully address Mandy's point, is I think once we have that baseline in place, we are conscious that we need to do much more in terms of workforce planning, both in terms of numbers, if you like, but also capabilities. So once we implement that model, that will be the baseline, and we'll track against that. And yes, happy to share metrics that show where we're investing and divesting in.
Yeah, and I think also the fees work will also help us understand what services we're recovering fees on and where we're not, because I think that's also important for us to have a headline on.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. I think just for the sake of completeness, my own thoughts are I'm fully supportive of working through this for the first quarter. I think, as you suggested, John, that makes complete sense. I think for me, the metrics are measuring a lot of inputs and they're not measuring many outputs. And I think actually that is an area for development, if I'm honest. I think Catherine was asking about linkages with the delivery plan. I think particularly in the area of innovation, I think it's a linkage with the life science sector vision is also going to be important, because I don't really feel assured personally that actually just looking at the number of clinical trial applications on its own is telling us that we're creating an ambitious, attractive place for UK investment in life sciences. And so I think that's an area that definitely needs some further work in terms of the potential metrics. And I think the dynamic organisation is much more complex, as Mandy was starting to explore there, than just numbers of FTEs. I think it is about where we're putting the resources, but actually it's how we're developing people, what we're doing around the inclusion. And I know there's a number of other metrics that we'll see in the quarterly version, but actually just counting the number of people doesn't show that that's almost just a snapshot of the current status. It doesn't show how the organisation is evolving and developing from my perspective. So I think there's more work to be done on the metrics, but it's a good start. I think there's a broad support here from the board in terms of welcoming the work that's been done, and we'll work with you, John, I think, in terms of evolving it further. Anthony, have you got a final comment, and then we'll need to move on?
Yeah, I just wanted to give the board some assurance. We did discuss, as Mandy said, at the ODRC the last meeting, finally, the high-level deliverables. And we discussed in quite a bit of detail there that this should be linked to the scorecard in exactly the way that you were describing. And I was going to cover it in my report later. But I think what we also saw was a strong understanding and commitment that it is not across the board cuts now, that investment will be made in the areas where investment's required, and that will reduce in the areas which are no longer priorities. So just to give you that assurance, the executive did discuss it with us and were clear that this was a piece of work to take forward. And I'm sure that this has been a helpful add-on to help them focus in that area.
So I think if I just would sum this up, I think that the board is supportive of the approach. I think we can see that, you know, we're progressing in the right direction. I think it's probably too early to say that we're assured that all the performance is on track because we haven't got all the data yet. I think it's probably fair. But I think we are seeing a strong alignment, and I'm very, very supportive of linking this to the delivery plan objectives rather than the typical Kaplan model. So, you know, I think we're absolutely moving in the right direction. Let's review it again in September with the full quarterly scorecard, and then determine what are the metrics we can maybe then potentially introduce after that. Okay. So thank you, John, and thank you to the team for the work that's done on that. So if we just move on to the next item, we're talking about patient safety next, and that's on page 26 of the board pack. And the question was what progress has been made on the short, medium and long-term deliverables from the Cumberland review. Cumberland review obviously reported on the 8th of July last year. So June, do you want to kick us off on this, please?
Yes, thank you, Stephen. So it is, as you say, 1 year on from publication of the Cumberland review. So it's a very appropriate time for the board to take stock of progress, and more importantly, how we're measuring the impact of the work. So as you say, 2 questions. Are we on track to deliver substantial revision to our ability to protect patient safety? And what difference are these changes actually going to make? So the paper sets out a very wide programme of work, if you like, straddling governance, patient and public involvement, a responsive safety reporting system, better evidence for regulatory decisions, and of course a strengthened set of legal tools, which we now have the opportunity of the MMD Act to create. And that's about overhauling. But the second question on measuring impact, I have to say, is less well advanced. It's under active consideration. Measures are being worked up. And we propose in particular to consult the Cumberland Patients Reference Group, which does include representatives of all the main affected patient groups, valproate, mesh, Primodos. They really are in a good position to give us their views on ideas like the Patient Engagement Index. So that's an area we'd really welcome the board's thoughts and views. So as you say, is the board assured of progress with this very broad programme of work? Is it delivering? And what are the board's views on monitoring the impact of the deliverables? Clearly, the Patient Safety and Engagement Committee has been a sort of, if you like, pivotal forum to help discuss these issues. And Stephen, if you're happy, I'm sure Mercy would like to come in there.
Yeah, I was going to come straight to Mercy next, actually. So what's
Great.
your perspective, Mercy, on some of this?
Yeah, I really welcome the fact that we're going back to the patient reference group to actually actively look at what measures would be suitable to monitor progress. We've really looked very closely at the Patient Safety and Engagement Committee at this area, and let's just say it's a work in progress. You know, that we obviously wanted kind of more evidence and deeper measures, but we're getting there. But to make sure that we're keeping it under review, we're bringing back particular areas on a regular basis back to committee, just to see what is happening, and if we are kind of developing better measures of impact, because impact and outcome is really what the committee wants to look at. And so we've already looked at ILAP, Safety Connect and medical devices, but all of them are scheduled to come back to us on a regular basis so that we can actually see what further progress is being made, what areas are being addressed. But it's I think we are kind of getting there. It's a good start, I think. I mean, would welcome the patient and public involvement strategy coming through consultation. Now it's up to implementation. And that's one of the key things that we'll be looking at, how things are implemented and how they're measured. And really that seeking that deeper assurance for the board, how these things are developing. I kind of welcomed the input from the agency about how things are going, and especially the examples they were giving, and specific examples. I think we need more of those about how patients are actually being involved. So the expansion and use of our own patient group consultative forum, that's great, but and the use of smaller focus groups, and then targeting on specific issues and bringing in people that with patients with specific experience is really, really important. So I think I welcome all those things, but yes, and I really welcome Alison coming on board and looking forward to really working with her and drilling down into some of the areas that really need developing on kind of evidence and impact.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I think on that point, Alison, obviously this is, if you like, where we are now. The baton's going to be handed on to you. I just wondered if you had any initial perspectives you wanted to share with us.
Oh, many thanks, Chair. Yes, as highlighted in the paper, so I joined yesterday, and I will be accountable going forward for safety and surveillance for all healthcare products, and more specifically with ensuring our response to the Cumberland review is delivered in full. So I'm really looking forward to picking up this baton and working with Mercy. Delighted to see, the initiatives, patient-centric initiatives, such as the establishment of the Patient Safety and Engagement Committee. That I really feel that really will advise and assure and strengthen our commitment to patient safety and really understand that perspective much better. Really looking forward to building on all of the actions that set out in the paper, and especially I think it's been already picked up a couple of times today with regards to strengthening and growing our data capture capabilities, because that will really support us in not only in proactively capturing those events that are harder, especially those ones harder to capture through the yellow card reporting scheme, but also, as highlighted today, really enable us to capture the impact of our actions and our risk mitigation sort of actions going forward. So yes, really delighted to be here and looking forward to working with colleagues on this incredibly important initiative. Thank you.
Yeah, no, well, that's great. And I think actually, I think in terms of demonstrating to the members of the public who are watching the meeting, then I can say since September, this is the third time we've talked about the Cumberland review. We've actually created a new board assurance committee on patient safety and engagement. We've now appointed, and Alison's here as our new chief safety officer. And then that's in addition to all of the good things that are actually identified within the paper too. We don't think the work is completed. This is very much a journey, but we've absolutely started, and we're committed to actually see this one through. So that's just a set of context. Anthony, can I ask you to start the questions, please?
Yeah, I'm really pleased to see the report and see how much progress has been made, because obviously this is a key area. And I know this might sound very simplistic, and I may have missed it, but I haven't seen anything on the complaints procedure. And one of the things we know is that one of the areas we failed in was not listening to people when they were complaining. And I just wonder if that's a topic that should be added somewhere within this piece of work, because I would hate it if we were missing those specific issues where people were raising them again and again at this time. I mean, it's historical, the challenges we had, and I know we've moved forward, but perhaps we've already done it and I've missed it, but if not, I just think it's worthy of looking at.
Mercy,
can I
just
come back on that? It's coming to our committee in December, so it's scheduled to take a deep dive into complaints. So for that very reason, we haven't really seen anything around complaints, and so the committee is really keen, kind of, to look at it.
Yeah, I think for me, actually, my experience in the NHS about hearing the patient voice, a time of complaint is actually the opportunity to really engage and understand what we can do differently and what we can learn from. So I'm really glad that's going to the patient safety engagement.
Yeah, I feel assured that Mercy is looking at it now.
Yeah, that's great. So Mandy, can I come to you next, please?
Oh yes, thanks, Stephen. I thought this was really good paper, so and very encouraged of the progress that was being made. So I'd just like to say that and thank everyone that's put that together. The question I had around patient engagement is probably taking a broader view, but from a industry point of view and people running trials, and maybe this is a link with ILAP, is the patient engagement tool, if you like, I suppose it's a bit like outsourcing some of that patient engagement so we can multiply the effect by using companies to do that more when they're designing their clinical trials. So is that, or how are we prioritizing that tool? I know it's one of the ILAP tools, but not yet there. But that could again give us quite a step change in our patient engagement, utilizing resources outside the agency.
Okay. June, have you got any thoughts on that?
I think it's a very helpful concept, a multiplier, but also making sure it links in with our outcome measures. We've already got the pilot with industry, as well as the patient involvement tool being piloted for ILAP, which is the one that we would, if you like, hone. But we do expect, as you say, companies to have done their own patient involvement, particularly as they've designed studies, patient-reported outcome measures, and so forth. We're also in our partnership work with NICE, looking at how we can consolidate, because this should be a case of building rather than just fragmentary looks. So I think the concept of a multiplier effect is incredibly helpful. And maybe we can look at that further at our next update. It is proceeding well. And I think as we develop the members of staff's approach to the owning their objective in areas like clinical trials, assessment, vigilance, then actually it should have an additive effect, that for an individual patient, they can see that journey reflected rather than having, you know, ad hoc, did the leaflet work for you type of questions. You've got a sort of cohesion. We've had that through the patient journey with Valproate, for example, although not from the very beginning. So I think that multiplier, let's weave that into our assessment. Have we actually used it?
Yeah, okay, that's great. Bruce, I know patient engagement and involvement is a key area of interest for you. So
two comments. The first about language, and I'm sorry if others don't agree with me, but I really urge you to stick with the word who when you refer to patients rather than that, which refers to objects. And there may be some minor semantic controversies about that, but I think that the MHRA, like NICE, has to be way on the correct side of the line. Please, please have it in the culture. It's patients who. The second thing is really just beating a drum that poor Alison is, thank goodness, going to escape from, because I'm going to be going. And that is my plea again, to in some way be looking at the contributions that patients have made. You've got a lot here about measuring patient representation, patient reporting, but when you actually engage patients to get advice in decision making, to get them to help with that, somehow trying to capture what they have contributed and how it has influenced decisions, I think is really important. And I say that not only because the methodology isn't well developed and you could contribute to that, but also because it is the way of learning how to do that better and seeing what bits of patient commentary are most influential and helpful. So I'm going to depart my last meeting of the board by banging that drum just one more time.
I think that's very welcome, Bruce. You know, patient involvement is the process, but that's not the end point. The end point is it actually makes a difference to the decisions that are made. And I think that's a point that's very well made. And June, I'm sure you'd agree with that.
Oh, absolutely. And as Rachel Bosworth knows, I'm on a personal mission on the they. And it can actually not even need to be who, it's you. Because if we're speaking to and with people, them is us. It's got to be not just a case of semantics, it's the whole cultural change. And in terms on where patients have made a difference, well, we've got an absolute case study in progress with isotretinoin. The inputs last week, and I hope this week, have been absolutely formative, as they were with Valproate. Things we would never have learned from any other mechanism. However, that acid test is what difference in receiving those inputs is it making? So regulation has to show that it means to change.
Yeah, and I think that's where the examples are so helpful. Yeah, back to Mercy's point right at the very beginning. So I think they're vital to help people understand. So okay, Michael, final question.
Yeah, just two questions for me. Like everybody else, very supportive of this paper. My first question relates to something that I know Bruce and David have said before, and it relates to awareness of the MHRA. So awareness will hopefully lead to greater engagement. And there's reference to the public patient, there's an omnibus study to track awareness, understanding and knowledge of how to engage with the MHRA, and we'll do that twice a year. Is that going to be an internal review, or are you actually going to use external people like Mori or any other of the big companies? Because in a previous life where awareness was incredibly important in my executive role on a board, we did get at least twice a year annual assurance from an independent source. Now, I know we've got the patient engagement committees, but I actually think being able to track awareness, it's not going to be necessarily of the profile of NICE, but given where we are at the moment with the success of COVID and the awareness of the MHRA, I really would want to build on that going forward. So that's my first question.
Well, should we just answer that one, Michael? Just to keep it easy, because I suspect Rachel might be able to help us in terms of awareness measures and the use of independent organisations to help us with that.
Yes, thank you. And certainly, Michael, that's our plan to use an independent, commission this from an independent, expert organisation, so that we have that rigour in that measure. And we're just looking at the procurement side of that now.
Okay, that's really great, Rachel. Thank you for that assurance. And Stephen, very quickly, my last question is, and it's very general. I listened last week to, I think it was on one of the radio programmes on Radio 4, and Baroness Cumberland was interviewed around how she felt government was responding to her review. I sensed a little bit of frustration, not necessarily directed at the MHRA. We were not mentioned at all. I just wanted June to give some assurance. I'm sure you are, June, but are we regularly engaging with Baroness Cumberland? Does she feel that we are moving in the right direction?
June, have you got a perspective on that?
I believe I can simply say, yes, we are. The main interface is through the group, the steering group that our DHSC colleagues run, because the span of recommendations goes from redress through to a much wider set of areas for improvement. Ours is as recommendation 6. So we've got it's a very important role, but it's not the whole space. So the main interface for engaging Baroness Cumberland is through DHSC, through the all-party parliamentary group, through First Do No Harm. Our minister in the space is Nadine Dorries. So there's a number of focal points, but we do receive input. And I think a key area, just so that the board is aware that we'll come back to, is our relationship with the future Patient Safety Commissioner. So let's make sure that we've got those points of intersection. We are part of the story, and a very, very important part, but there is a broader interface. Our meetings through the steering group are every week. So it's a very regular update. So there should be a good flow of information. The steering group has occasionally allowed for meetings for us with the Cumberland team, and we do those sporadically. So the team is still in place.
Okay, well, thank you for that positive assurance.
I think that's very helpful, because it just shows that this is very much active, an ongoing process, I think. So it wasn't a review that was done a year ago and nothing's happened. That's far, far from the truth. Okay, well, I think that's very helpful. So I think we can say, June, with confidence that the board is assured that the agency is making progress. I think, as we've discussed, I think there is still more work to do around the impact of deliverables, and the impact it has and the tangible difference it makes to regulatory decisions that impact on patients. So I think that's, we'll need to keep working on that, but I think actually it's very much moving in the right direction. So thank you to you and the team for that. So if we move on to the next item, which is on page 35, this is the assurance that can be provided by the Organisational Development and Remuneration Committee. So Anthony, you can assume we've read it, but what are the key points you'd like to highlight to the board?
What I'm going to do is focus on the updates from the last meeting, because unfortunately our meeting was held just after the deadline for the board papers. So I do seem to have a few. We'll update you, so that's what I'm going to focus on. The board will know and shared the ODRC's disappointment in the pace of change. You know, we'd got to the stage where we were feeling very frustrated, particularly post the approval of the organisation structure last month. What I would say, I have seen a significant change in that at this meeting, the last meeting, and Mandy, I'm sure, will agree with me. Mandy's also on the ODRC. I think momentum has really picked up, as has the executive commitment to driving this forward. I saw a real ignition and excitement to move forward. So I do think that I can up my sort of warranted assurance to more positive. I do think also it's worth noting that the organisation has capitalised on those delays to initiate activities around voluntary redundancy, increase the one-to-one engagement with individuals, and also review again the blockers to change that we've discussed in the past. I'm also, I mentioned earlier, so I won't go into detail, that we finally saw the high-level deliverables. They were very specific, very measurable. There is some work to go, and we are assured that they're going to be utilised to support the organisation, particularly this effective distribution of resources. So we won't see for example, a 20% cut across budgets. We will see resources being focused into the areas that we've identified of strategic importance and disinvestment as required. So again, much more assured than in the past, feeling more positive. And Mandy, I think, again, would concur with that. I'm not going to cover culture and DI because they're other topics on the board paper, other than to say that they came to the committee twice and were very receptive to our somewhat challenging activities on occasion. So I think there's a lot of work behind what you're going to see at the board that you haven't seen. The people strategy, I wanted to congratulate Vanessa, who led that piece of work. It is significantly improved over previous people strategies I've seen and other organisations. Particularly the format, it's much more accessible, it's very clear what we want to be doing, and again, it's measurable targets as opposed to rhetoric, which is welcome. And then the final topic was executive remuneration. We discussed with the chief executive, we agreed levels of performance as required. We made some recommendations versus the modelling of behaviours and leadership that we wanted to see supported to drive forward the new business model. And June is now actioning that within the organisation. So I'm happy to take any questions on either those comments or the paper as it stands, but hopefully it's fairly self-explanatory.
Okay, well, thank you, Anthony. That's great. June, can I just come to you first and just sort of say, obviously, you know, as the executive member of you know, that particular committee, any sort of further thoughts?
My main thought is how the non-executive members of the committee have really helped to create the environment for that change in momentum. And that's an analogy, it's a bit like riding a bicycle. You struggle, and then you can do it. And I think in the last month, we've seen a lot of things fall into place around particularly the need for this active staff engagement. So it's really just a big thank you to Antony for helping that climate and that environment be created so that things start to fit together and change can start to really happen.
Okay, that's great. Probably just at this point, Sash, can I just ask you to bring Vanessa onto the screen for the next item, please? And Mandy, can I just come to you in terms of any other observations from you from the committees and the work that you've been doing on this?
I think I would very much echo what Antony says. We did see a step change, and I think we were much more convinced there was a commitment to have that engagement with staff and understand the leadership, but also the importance of there are lots of opportunities for change in the new structure, and really encouraging people to see that in a very positive light rather than the sort of, oh, this is all going to be a cut, but actually the individual conversations are going to be so crucial to understand, you know, what people they help them see opportunities, and we began to see that moving forward as well as seeing a bit more of an activity level of what people will be doing in the different groups. And that's not perfect, it never will be, but there was a cohesion across each of the different areas, understanding what they need to do to deliver the transformation. So yes, I think it's as June says, I know there's a lot of work here and this is very difficult, but I think that getting the level 1, level 2 leadership in place is going to be so pivotal to driving the change, and it will accelerate.
Okay. And Rachel, I just wonder whether you could just sort of say a few words around what the staff engagement plan is that's been announced internally.
Yes, certainly. So we launched that yesterday with a Transformation Champions initial meeting. We have a session with all our senior managers planned for tomorrow. And then going forward, starting on Friday, we have function-specific meetings which are led by chief officers and open to all staff taking place. And then over the coming weeks, more of a discussion approach where people can speak with senior managers and their own managers around the future plans and design. So there's a lot of activity happening. We have a week-by-week plan so that we can monitor progress and make sure that over this 6-week period, all members of staff have got an opportunity to engage at one level or another. And the other thing I should mention is, in parallel, there's also engagement with our trades unions, and they will be involved in relevant meetings as well.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you very much for that. So I think Anthony's report is quite self-explanatory, but if there are any other questions, I'm happy to take them. No, I think silence is a very good sign, actually, Anthony. Well, thank you for that. Again, I think we're asked to note and to consider this report. I think actually your key point around assurance that actually progress is now being made. I think there is a tangible increase of pace, and we just need to do the right thing for our staff, and engagement is a key part of that. So that's exactly what we will do. Okay, so thank you for that. So the next item, first of all, I'd like to just welcome Vanessa Birchall-Scott, our Director of HR, who's obviously been involved in preparing the next paper, which is on the strategic priorities for the development of culture and diversity to enable the future operating model. So, again, organizational design is one component. We're going to talk about culture and equality and diversity at this meeting, and then we'll be talking about leadership at the next meeting. So, I think these are all the building blocks to build a new, productive and dynamic organization. John, you're the board sponsor for this particular area. Are there any introductory comments that you'd like to make?
Just briefly, Stephen, thank you. So can I just start by recognising 3 of our HR colleagues who are in the audience today, Malgosia and Anushay, and clearly Vanessa, who's just joined us, who helped produce the paper. Vanessa will help with questions and comments from the board. And we'd also like to thank Mercy for her input and help on an early draft. In terms of setting the context, I think we've all experienced organisations in our personal lives who claim to put the customer at the heart of everything they do, but the experience does not quite live up to the promise. So many of the changes we want and intend to make in order to make the MHRA patient focused and innovative will need a change in our culture to embed that, I believe. As the paper says, our predominant culture is safety and order, which is not necessarily a bad thing for a medicines regulator. However, I'd suggest we need to leaven that with innovation, speed and responsibility as well. None of this can be done without leadership, and leadership in an organisation which is one of 28 European states is different to one that works to plough its own furrow and support the government's agenda for life sciences. So we need to help our leaders develop and deliver the changes that are necessary. Our staff can always spot a gap between words and actions. The link between performance and diversity, or EDI as we call it in the paper, is generally accepted, and we need to be more reflective of the patient population that we actually serve day to day. The paper sets out a way forward. As Anthony said, we've shared the culture map and detailed action plan with the OD&R committee. They may want to share their thoughts initially.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe could I just come to, well, thank you for that, John. That's very helpful, actually. Mercy, can I maybe just come to you first, because I know you were involved in an early draft, and then I'll maybe come to Anthony next, if that's okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight a few things. I mean, thank John and his team for incorporating some of my kind of early suggestions, which is, you know, don't take for granted the evidence base and that people know what the evidence base is for a lot of the things that we're trying to achieve. So I'm glad those kind of references are in, and don't rely on huge numbers of appendices as well. So we don't have that. They've incorporated that within the paper. So hopefully that should make a difference. The things I wanted to just highlight is on the cultural side, that idea that a learning organisation captures a lot of what we're trying to do here. The need for good leadership and champions, and I know that we're going to talk a bit more about that and really what the board does. But within this paper, the allyship issue, that bit where we actually, from a leadership point of view, join with groups that have traditionally not been listened to and things, so that we really align ourselves and find out actually what our staff think. Yeah. Because I think that's really, really important. So all those kind of key things I kind of take from this paper. There is quite a lot to digest. It's a big issue. It's very linked to patient focus for me. So patient involvement, as well as culture change, as well as diversity and inclusion, is all key things for me. And they do come together. So it's really good if we can kind of set that culture where all those things are happening. And really, we can welcome the contribution of all our staff, but also that involvement of patients is so key to this too. So we're focusing mainly on kind of what staff and culture within the organisation, but that's about making it a welcoming place for all.
A welcoming place for all. I think that's a very nice summary. Anthony, I'll come to you, and then I'll maybe ask Vanessa for a contribution. Anthony.
Yeah, I think it's difficult because we saw a massive amount of information and data, and obviously once you're trying to simplify this for board papers, we don't want to the board doesn't want to be overloaded with all that background information. So one of the things I think we do need to look at is the communication and publication of the background information, particularly for we're being a transparent organisation, because at the moment, of course, the committee's assurance reports come to the board, but some of the data we see could be utilised within the organisation and probably is. So I just cite that as an example. And for example, the culture work, a magnificent amount of work had gone into the technical and theoretical side, as well as the actual focus on the loci and the different changes. But what we asked them to focus on for the board was, June took it back to the executive to say, what will be the focus that if we measure it and we do it well, by the end of this year, we can see that we've delivered the change in culture. So I think I would like to say we have some really good experts working in this area. I can see the areas that we asked the board to focus on, the executive to focus on, have come through. Diversity and inclusion, very similar, actually. There's an awful lot happening within the organisation that will support the change in culture and support the moves we want to make in diversity and inclusion. But I don't think it all needs to get reported to this group. Yeah. And my final point is, the executive were very keen on this point because the organisation had a history, and you'll see it's in my report, of preparing spreadsheets that capture any activity that might be linked to a topic. So I'll say Cprd, for example, rather than either of these two. And what that meant is that somebody was trawling through other reports, other activities, and pulling together a combined and detailed timetable of every activity that was being done in the organisation and saying, here's how you can see we're driving change. So we've suggested to them that's not a good utilisation of resources. They've taken it on board. So I think what you'll expect to see coming forward is a focus on the meaningful points, and you may see it just referencing other reports, other activities, other programmes, rather than having those massive spreadsheets that don't really add any value. I've focused it deliberately on the process because the culture, I say, I think has already started to change. And I have seen a big shift, particularly this month, in the understanding that the leadership values we need to see need to be driven by the executive, and they need to demonstrate them themselves.
Okay, so there's definitely a, you focus on process and top down there. I think that's clear. As Vanessa knows, one of my concerns is actually how we move from the current state of uncertainty, which is what we currently have, to the new future state. And Vanessa, I just wonder whether there's anything you could just add in terms of how we're going to start from where we are and how we're going to move forward to achieve the new ideal culture and EDI process that you've described.
Yes, thanks very much, Stephen. I'm going to start with one of my visualizations. I'm known for these. I see things in a visual way, and I see culture as an umbrella, if you like. The way we do things, it's a very, very big picture. And things like equality, diversity and inclusion, staff engagement, so on and so forth, they're all spokes in the umbrella. And we all know that if one of those is broken, you're in trouble. So we need to look at the whole of culture. We've specifically focused on ED&I here as well, but all of those spokes are equally important in a way. And the culture mapping exercise that was referred to was about using the intelligence that we have to hand, the people survey feedback, both data and comments, the pulse surveys, all of the data that we collect in one way or another, the intelligence we have told us what it's like now. What is it like to be in this organisation now? And then we worked with colleagues, and the board will be aware, we did a very big piece of work on values and behaviours especially, to identify where do we need to be. So that action planning we're doing is to get us from where we are now to where we need to be. And in terms of the transformation programme, it would be easier actually if we'd made even more progress on our culture change to move through the transformation programme, but we can really use the programme and the progress to flag and initiate and confirm, if you like, what we need by way of a culture looking forward. So it's too big an opportunity to miss, not to feed it in as we move through the transformation programme as well.
Yeah, okay, no, that's great. I suppose, yeah, Mark, I'm just wondering whether I could just bring you in actually, because obviously I'm just thinking it's very easy for it's more difficult for a separate site sometimes to feel involved, and I just remember culture and actually being part of the one agency. I just wonder if you've got any perspectives from the scientific perspective around, how this works for, the scientists in the organisation.
The scientists actually have a very similar shared culture across the agency, which is they are all in love with the medical and scientific detail. And where I've really seen them take off and get involved is when you give them a shared problem. So I think that's probably where I would make the recommendations, is we do set up the sharing problems. And I'm looking to launch at least one initiative around the life sciences vision where we get that building up. Now, that starts as a piecemeal at the bottom. So we do need to link that closely to what Vanessa's talking about, which is what culture is, as well as details of the project. But in my experience, if we give them good problems to work on together, it will follow quite quickly.
Yeah, okay, I think that's helpful. I'd also like to bring John Quinn in actually as well, if I may, John. I'm just thinking, we talk about equality and diversity here. In terms of, is there anything you could assure the board on in terms of how we ensure that people have got the appropriate technological equipment that they need if they've got particular special needs? Because, it's all very easy everyone having a laptop, but that isn't necessarily going to work in every situation. If we want to be genuinely equal, we need to make sure we're taking into account those sort of considerations for our staff. Is there anything you could add from the tech side to assure the board?
Thank you, Stephen. So we have a process at the moment that looks at what assistive technologies people need and apply that. So I think that's quite a well-worn path about assessment and meeting. We are, like in so many other aspects, limited by some of the legacy.
Yeah.
In moving, as we intend to do, to new technologies and platforms, I think the world's moved on in tech an awful lot. In fact, actually, we've really stepped up in that space. There's quite a lot more available that we can take advantage of. So as we make that move, I think things will improve. But actually, that's not a bad idea. I think perhaps should think about measuring that so we can see how we are improving going forward. Yeah, because it's trying to make this real for people, and I think that's what I'm really interested in. And just as another example, as you're well aware, as a board, we've been going through a process of non-executive director recruitment, and I've been really looking to make sure that diversity is at the key of that recruitment campaign. And I'm not just talking of diversity of the protected characteristics. I've also been looking for diversity of experience, diversity of thought, and actually, frankly, diversity of age, because all of those components will potentially give us a different breadth. And so I think that equality and diversity, comes in many different forms. And it's, so I just want to use that as an example of how I've been using that to think quite significantly about how we make sure we strengthen the board as we move forward. And I think each and every one of us can do a component of that. So, okay, so that's probably quite a good preface. I'll just try to make sure that everyone's had the opportunity to contribute. Are there any specific questions about the paper first, in terms of, because the first question is, we've been asked to consider if these culture and equality, diversity, inclusion priorities will enable the future operating model. Are we assured that that's the case? Or are there any other priorities that you think that are currently missing? Barbara.
Yes, I think I'm on Vox now. Yeah. I just wanted to make a slightly left field comment, if I could, and that is that everyone's experience of the need for diversity and everyone's experience of feeling that their situation culturally or age-wise or any otherwise affects their work relationships is totally individual, because we collect data, but they're about the average person in that group who has a problem. And one way that you get individual views, and I've learned this rather starkly when I've been doing staff appraisals, particularly medical staff, for both the MHRA and for NHS colleagues, is that an appraisal is a very good way of eliciting individual difficulties and triumphs. And in the NHS, certainly, but less so in the civil service setting, there's been a move to use the appraisal to ask people about barriers to their career progress and training, and also barriers which affect their self-esteem and performance. And I've seen one or two fairly dreadful examples of people who've been undermined by their situation and couldn't find a way to deal with it. So I wonder if the HR people do consider gathering some obviously anonymized information, because appraisals should be completely confidential, and the appraisee should be confident that it is. But has anybody ever considered using appraisals as an approach to this, which is suitable for an organization or a hospital trust and seems to work quite well?
Yeah, and I'll bring Vanessa in there if I can. Vanessa, in terms of, you just give some background on the way we use appraisals in the organization to that effect.
Yes, thank you. So, I mean, you're absolutely right. The richness of the whole range of characteristics and experiences means that it's quite difficult, if you don't get down to an individual level, to capture all of that and to make sure that you do identify all of the various issues and the experiences and the feelings and the perceptions that people have. So, at a more pan-agency level or at a particular group level, sometimes the detail can be lost because you are pulling out themes and trying to look for where you can best focus your efforts. Now, we launched a brand new appraisal scheme for all delegated staff. That's the vast majority of staff, other than senior civil servants. That scheme is directed by Cabinet Office. And we've really opened it out in terms of richness and included all of those values and behaviours in there, in terms of the way of both having quarterly discussions, a really meaty quarterly discussion, as well as, the kind of focusing on people's personal development planning and, of course, their kind of annual objectives and so on. So we're looking for feedback from managers and staff on how that's going, because literally it started from the 1st of April. But hopefully we will pick up more of a richness of information from the feedback from those. But that's also a very helpful suggestion, Barbara, and we'll certainly look further into what we can do around specifically pointing managers to that area for discussion.
Yeah,
thank you.
I think that's really helpful, Barbara, and I think it's about using all the tools that we have available, isn't it? So, it's not just about the staff surveys. This is yet another individual tool we can capitalise on. So, okay, great, thank you. Michael, can I bring you in, please?
Yeah, Stephen, just building on Barbara's point a bit, hopefully left field. It's an odd question to ask for an organisation as a regulator. Do we feel this shift in culture will make us a little bit more commercial? Because basically, we have to protect the public, really get that, but equally we have the objective that we are trying to regulate in a way that promotes UK PLC. And I just wondered, is that part of it, and where does that come in? Is that what we mean by innovation? I'm particularly interested in that. And then my other question is, I think I've got the assurance, but just building on what I used to do, trying to change the culture of 1,000 accountants, which is what I tried to do within my previous organisation, probably the same with scientists. Where I think I got my fingers burned, to be open with you, in the very early days, was it was too complex. The analysis needs to be complex, but the communication and the implementation needs to be fairly simple, because if you don't, you lose people quite quickly. Those are my two questions. One, well, I'm still trying to get a bit more assurance, and one, a question of where do we get that commercial grip that we need to have?
I'll come to Vanessa in a second, actually. Mercy, was this a related point? Do you want to sort of add to Michael's comments by any chance?
I wanted to actually say that the most of the evidence base for diversity is in commercial organisations and their increased productivity. So really, that's kind of saying on the diversity side, and obviously with the culture and stuff, that's why we need innovation. And the changing the other way around, we need diversity to help innovation. So productivity goes up a great deal when you have more diverse cultures, and as Stephen says, get outside that groupthink. Get new ideas in and things, and collaboration and more diversity in the people that kind of talk to each other has been shown to be really beneficial for organisations, certainly on the commercial side.
Yeah.
Mercy, could I ask a quick question on that? It's really interesting what you said, and just from my experience as well. Initially, I looked at diversity purely from an organisational perspective, but what you find in the finance profession is that as a discipline across multiple organisations, it's not as diverse as it could be. So what we had to do was not look for the solution just within the organisation, but how we engaged with other parts of that sector. So I just wondered what your take on the scientific community is, really. It's just really fascinating.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important to kind of look outside, and I think the Academy of Royal Colleges, for instance, did a report on women in science, and there've been lots of reports about increasing diversity and where we're getting our recruitment base from. And I know John Quinn has been looking at social mobility and apprenticeship schemes. So all those things are really, really kind of key as well. And of course, Stephen and I attend the ALBs working in health and social care at the moment, and we're kind of learning from models from what's happening in other organisations like the CQC and NHS England and others, which is really, really important, I think, as well.
Okay, well, thank you both. Vanessa, do you want to have an initial response? Then I'll come to John next.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think, Michael, you're absolutely right. You know, risk balance, financial awareness, they all need to be fed into the way we do things. And indeed that innovation, that very important innovation link, you know, a priority for the organisation going forward in terms of our delivery plan. So, you know, I see everything that we're talking about by way of culture, and more specifically when we focus on EDI, as ultimately having an impact on how commercial we are on our kind of bottom line, because we will be operating to best effect and everyone will be operating at the highest level, you know, that they can do. And that of course will influence then what it's like to work in the organisation and our attractiveness, but also what it's like to interact with the organisation, our many stakeholders, and of course the ultimate in terms of patients. So absolutely.
Yeah. And I think let's not lose Michael's perspective around keeping it simple as well, because if it becomes so complex that people don't understand it, then it doesn't change. Yeah, that would be my biggest worry, I think. So, John, as board sponsor, what have you got some further thoughts on that?
So just coming back on Michael's good point, I think on the commercial aspects, I think a partial answer is there's a couple of things that I think will help. So the fact that we have the delivery plan, which does actually have a number of commercial areas in it, areas that we hope to develop, linking that through to objectives, I think will up the ante compared with previously on that. And also what we're finding is the general activity of reviewing our fees is encouraging the interest in, you know, people now realize that we need to actually cover our costs, which historically, perhaps being part of the European system, was masked. So again, that is upping the ante. So it won't totally solve it, but they're contributing.
No, it doesn't. This is part of the reality of being a sovereign regulator rather than part of the European network, isn't it? Let's be honest. So, okay, Mandy, last question from you.
As a couple of reflections, really building on the experience that I think we've worked through in making the change. And I think one of the really important things for enabling people to make a change, to make a transition, is to have the right environment, which quite often leaders create. So you need enough support, but you need quite a bit of challenge as well. But if people feel they're on their own, they won't be innovative because they feel there's a fear of failure. And in a regulator where there's quite black and white answers, quite often people are looking for, helping people make small steps towards change is really important. So this is one of the things I learned in my executive career. Creating the environment for change is a key responsibility of leaders. And wherever you are in the organisation, not just the board, but if you've got a team of 3 or 4, it's enabling people to both support and challenge them, not doing it for them, but delegating effectively. And I think we need to be sort of sympathetic to that. But if things are just not happening, then maybe people are in the wrong job. So I think you have to create that environment for innovation. There's lots of fine words, but there's examples wherever you are in the organisation where you've got to encourage people to find a solution. And I think that comes at all levels and can be modelled at all levels.
Yeah.
And that if you get things wrong, but you've got them wrong for the right reason, then there's got to be some forgiveness, if you like, and that's a learning opportunity. If you get it wrong 3 times in a row and you do the same thing, that might not be quite the same, but I think it's that subtlety.
Yeah, there's something really important about creating the right environment for change. You know, and I think actually something that's really important to me is that, you know, we're going through a process of change at the moment, but this is not a one-off. This is going to be a continuing state of evolution and iteration and change. You know, it's not a one-off event. So I think actually we need to be able to cope with continuing to evolve our processes, our organisation, and the way we actually can support patients as we learn more, as technology increases, as product and relationships and stakeholder relationships will evolve. So I think it's fair to say that from what I'm hearing around the table, yeah, that I think actually I've heard no one disagree with the priorities that have been set out in this particular paper. So I think actually, you know, we've considered that, and I think we can say that these priorities will enable the future operating model and the delivery plan. There's been 2 or 3 useful additional insights. There was a second action on the board paper, which was to agree how board members will individually and collectively demonstrate visible allyship and commitment to equality, diversity and inclusion. And I wonder, June, if I maybe just come to you and just ask how you would like to take this piece forward, because there's a number of potential responsibilities or areas of interest identified in the paper. And so as Chief Executive, how would you like to lead the organisation and the board to help us demonstrate visible allyship?
Well, thank you. And it's been a tremendous discussion. Many elements feed into an overall plan that the executive needs to be the models, that we need to be that change and to start to demonstrate it through every engagement opportunity. As Rachel has mentioned, we're meeting all managers tomorrow. And I think the words that we've just heard from Mandy are really inherent to that, creating the environment to change, to support and make sure the challenge is there. I'm quite a fan of nudge theory, because triggers can be small steps or they can be nudges. And I think we've got to start to reward and to highlight examples of where an outward focused, engaging, enabling regulator does make a difference to patients and the public health. So it's a broad programme, but I think having agreed the priorities today, it's for the executive to then pick up that challenge and to model each and every one of us those values and behaviours, and creating that environment that makes it easier, whether by small steps or by nudging, for those behaviours to change. And I think probably we'll be coming back with some sort of litmus. We talked at the committee about having a culture index of some sort that could be comprised of particular elements that start not just with feedback from those we serve, complaints, etc., that start to actually pick up the indices of change. A welcoming place for all, internally and for everyone who approaches us. And particularly, I think our touchstone is mirroring and embracing the people, the population we serve. And that's the goal throughout. So it's probably a lot of words, but I think the buck stops and starts with the executive.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful commitment, June. So thank you for that. And in the paper, it talks about having a senior leadership champion for each of the characteristics that have been identified. So I assume that the executive committee will take that away. I think you can take as read that the non-executives will be happy to participate as required. But I think it's, as you say, it's an executive responsibility to be the champion for each of those areas. But I think as non-execs, we want to help to role model the right behaviours in the organisation. So thank you for that. Thank you to the team that put the paper together. Thank you, Vanessa, for your contribution. But I think actually this is another of the building blocks to create the organisation in the future that will support and help to keep patients safe. That's ultimately the ultimate aim of all of this work. So thank you very much. And on that basis, I'll move on to the final substantive item, which is the risk assurance report from the Audit and Risk Assurance Committee. So Michael, do you want to just say a few words of by way of introduction, then we can go to questions?
Yeah, just to three key points, Stephen, if I do them in reverse order. Inevitably, the work that has been done in support of the accounts will be brought together, all internal audits, reports and observations on the performance of the agency. They raised a number of issues which I think are central to the change programme in terms of improving the capability of management within the organisation. And just to note, I was very pleased to receive June and her colleagues' assurance that that was central to the transformation programme. And as part of ARAC's work next year, we will continue to monitor and discuss and support those improvements in management practice as we go forward. If I could just focus on two actions that the board assigned to us. One was around financial sustainability, and this was looking at the worst and best case scenarios. So my only observation on this is that I think we can give assurance that this board has seen and approved a number of strategies that, if implemented effectively, will put us into or mitigate the risk of not being financially secure going forward. But as I've said before, and I think as colleagues know, this is all time critical now. And I just make that point, and June and colleagues and John gave assurance that they're really on the case and ARAT will review progress in terms of financial performance at its November meeting. So we get to the mid-year point, end of September, we will have 6 months of financial data, and we'll be in a stronger position to understand where we're going to end and what progress we've made with some of the cost savings. So I take that away as a serious action. Related to this is the change in trading fund status, and the board asked us to look at other organisations that had undergone similar transition from being a trading fund to becoming within the remit of the financial control regime of the Department of Health. We had a very helpful presentation from the DVLA, and I think the messages that we took from that is this is more complex than you realise, that there are implications both in terms of process within the organisation and culture change, and it is clear that we will be under greater scrutiny than we have in the past in terms of our financial management, and we need to make sure that we've got the processes and attitudes in place to ensure that we can deliver on that. And the recommendation from the DVLA is that we need to manage that as a project, and with the new Deputy Director of Finance joining the organisation, replacing Boriana and John, that is now going to be run as a formal project. The important thing I'd stress as well is it's not just simply at the 31st of March, we cease to be a trading fund and that's it. There is a transition. We need to make sure that in terms of our financial plans, where we have made investment decisions, we've got ongoing funding for those key enablers that we need. And I know John Fundry and Joe, the new finance director, on that. So again, ARAT will continue to monitor how that is being implemented. But I think it was a good suggestion from the board, early on in this transition to look at the experience of other organisations and draw on those as best as we can. I think that's all I'd say. I've tried to set out in the plan, in my report, different stages over the next 12 months when ARAT will be seeking further assurance as this change programme is implemented, and they are clearly drafted, and we'll report back to the board accordingly. Very, very final point. I know you're going to probably say something shortly, but I would like to say thanks to Barbara and Anthony, who have both been at different times steadfast members of the committee, and thank them for their input. And of course, Mandy, and if my colleagues have got anything else to add, I'd very please welcome them to do so now.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you, Michael. John, just from an executive point of view, John Fundry, again, sort of this is very much in your remit. Any particular perspective you want to add to Michael's comments?
I'd just echo Michael's comments, actually, which we did find the input from the DVSA very useful, actually, particularly perhaps some of the areas that you might not traditionally have covered. So, as Michael said, we've set that up as a formal project. It's likely that we will need to have to broaden it out beyond the pure financial area, which we will do. So yes, helpful discussion.
Okay, that's great. So, okay, colleagues, are there any specific questions from Michael's report? I think I'm very pleased that actually, the key actions that the board set have clearly been addressed. So I genuinely thank you to the team for doing that. And I personally get a lot of assurance from the words that you've said, Michael. Okay, I'm not seeing any particular comments. Okay, on that basis then, so let's just say that we can be assured that there's a clear plan in place. I think what's good is you've talked about external audit. There's an internal audit plan that's clearly underway, and then actually just looking at the experience of how we move forward. So I think we'll continue to get your regular assurance reports, Michael, to this board. So we'll take a lot of assurance from that. Okay, that being the case, that brings us to a close of the substantive item. But now is probably a good time to take questions from members of the public. So Rachel, I assume we've got a number of questions coming in through the chat function. I think I can see that some have been coming through. I know we've also had some questions that were submitted in advance. Do you want to talk through what the first question would be?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Stephen. So we'll start off with a question that's relating to clinical trials, and it's about the recovery trial. So the questioner is saying that the recovery trial last month announced that a monoclonal antibody cocktail from Regeneron and Roche has helped to save lives among hospitalised patients with COVID-19 who've not mounted a natural or vaccine-induced immune defence. And the questioner is saying that doctors tell them they're desperate to start using this this product mix, but can't access it because it's not authorised for the patient group. The company hasn't submitted an application and the data lies with the recovery team. So the questioner is asking what work the MHRA is doing to facilitate access to this treatment for patients, and when can doctors expect to have access for it?
Okay, maybe I could come to June to take that particular question.
Thank you. We have clearly, all of us, been engaging and following the important progress from this very significant clinical trial. When it comes to the question, what does the MHRA do to support and facilitate it? We've engaged with the developers right from the outset, and with the view, as we've done throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, of facilitating access by patients when there has been an important step forward. We all think about the dexamethasone, for example, big public health gain from rapid access. So the steps for the regulator obviously include a very rigorous evaluation of the data and consulting our expert advisory group and the Commission on Human Medicines, and all of that is planned in. So while I can't give a date, I can absolutely confirm that the facilitation is there, that the data are being accessed, assessed, and expert independent advice obtained. We will publish our assessment report, and the procedure is going forward in the coming very short time frame, weeks, not months. So all well in hand, but with the absolute commitment to making sure that patients can get access to this important treatment as soon as the right population and conditions have been fully worked through and identified. As the question has talked about, it's for antibody negative patients, but how does that look like in traditional, if you like, hospital diagnostic care? So there's some things to work through, but it's very actively being progressed.
Okay, well, thank you very much. As I mentioned, there was a number of pre-submitted questions. So the next pre-submitted question was submitted by Hager El-Kadar, who I'm very pleased to say is joined us on screen. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Hager.
It's Hager.
Hager, I'm very sorry.
Yes, yes.
Would you like to just state your affiliation, and then would you like to ask your question to the board?
Yes, thank you for allowing me to ask a question to the board. My name is Hajar El-Kadar. I've been working as a community pharmacist for over 10 years in London. The MHRA prides itself in putting patients first, but as a pharmacist, I have to admit I have concerns. The MHRA has approved the Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna, and Janssen vaccines. These are the first coronavirus vaccines ever attempted in humans. Medical interventions such as these are without a history, and so we cannot fully assess the long-term risks, safety, as well as the anticipated benefits and consequences of the mRNA therapy. My main concern really has always been the incredible speed at which these vaccines have been moved through controlled trials and the mass deployment. I and many other pharmacists, I'm sure, are aware of the limitations of the pharmacovigilance data and these adverse drug reactions. However, these don't necessarily mean that the observed side effects render it unsafe for usage. However, my question really is why the MHRA does not insist on patients being aware of the increased risk of lifelong disabilities, which have been reported to the MHRA. For example, the over 4,500 reports of visual impairment, including blindness, of which I have seen multiple examples in the community. And briefly, can anyone comment on the stance the MHRA currently has on the usage of therapies such as ivermectin, which has not only been shown to reduce death, but also as a prophylactic for SARS-CoV-2 around the world? Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. There's a number of quite important points there, actually. So June, could I ask you to start this, the answer, please?
Well, thank you, and really pleased that Haga has put together such an important set of issues. And maybe before I even begin, to say that the pharmacy community has been absolutely at the forefront, both in deployment and in monitoring safety. So big kudos to colleagues in pharmacy who've really been helping us fight the awful pandemic. The first point you were making was around the speed. And I guess you'll forgive me for just highlighting how we changed our way of working, but we didn't compromise on rigor. So although we were able to work in the shortest time, we actually did all the steps, we met the standards, and it was by working in a different way with rolling reviews, with parallel working and real-time data analysis, including by our independent experts. So the big point there is the whole completion was done to the highest standards we would normally expect for a vaccine being given to large numbers of healthy people. I think the second strand that you've highlighted is the limitations of our current pharmacovigilance systems. And I hope you've picked up throughout our conversation at the public board today, the number of strategies we're using, not just to enhance how we detect the signal, but the way we plan to use data in a much better way, linking up with clinical records and so on. So we use a tool called the rapid cycle analysis. We've created a cohort, a cohort we call our yellow card monitoring cohort for COVID. We're linked with academia. You might have heard of Open Safely, to do some specific studies. So we're using every which way we can to narrow those uncertainties around reporting. In terms of long-term safety, that really is a big question. Particularly, we know that COVID itself, long COVID, is having such an impact. So yes, there are studies in place, and we regularly interact with international fellow regulators about how that challenge can be addressed. Visual impairment is one of the expected areas of concern that we look out for. And you might have picked up in our last ADR report that we're looking at a particular visual issue called Miller-Fisher syndrome, when the eye muscles can be affected, but extremely rare. So we're on the case, we've put our surge resource on the case, and we're using every strand of data effectively. So if anybody watching or listening is thinking, did my report count, or did it just sink into the massive pile? Every report counts. You've asked a final specific question about ivermectin, and the agency is also engaged in a therapeutic task force where we're looking at a number of interventions that may or may not be of therapeutic value. So I hope, Haga, I've given you a sense of the breadth of the work. But if there's any individual aspects you think you'd like more clarity on, very happy to continue that, perhaps outside this meeting. Stephen, thank you.
Okay. Can I just ask quickly, Haja, whether that does answer your key questions? And then if you'd like to have a follow-up conversation separately?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely perfect. Thank you very much for addressing everything that I have been concerned about, June. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you for asking the question, and thank you for giving your permission to be seen on screen today. We do appreciate that very much. So thank you, and you have a nice day. Okay, Rachel, can I ask for the next question, please?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. So this question has come, I think, as a result of the discussion earlier about ILAP and patient engagement in the ILAP toolkit. So the questioner is commenting that sometimes when industry tries to engage patients, it can hit obstacles if they approach a medical charity, because charities are funded by public donations and so are wary of getting too close to pharma or being seen as partners in research trials. The questioner is asking whether for patient engagement and involvement on specific issues, do we make use of the medical charities who have a vast membership who are ready to engage and have expertise on specific issues, presumably because it's not always possible for industry to do that?
Okay, so medical charities involvement. So Sam, at this stage, I don't think there's anything specifically related to medical charities with ILAP, as I understand it, or is there an opportunity there, do you think?
Thank you, Chair. So we do have quite a wide range, quite a diverse group actually on our patient reference group that comes from, well, they're represented, or representing rather, a number of different groups. And some of those indeed are charities. So I would say that we are already engaging to a point with the charities and indeed individuals to actually form part of that group. And we're looking at it from a broader perspective as well, from inclusion and diversity. So I hope that provides reassurance that we are engaging.
Okay, so there's definitely engagement. The other part of the question, Rachel, as I understood it, was around, it slows the process down. Was I correct?
Yes, that's right.
And June, I just wonder whether there's anything else from your perspective you could add around that.
It's, I think, going to be a real opportunity for early engagement. As Sam has said, we have an extensive outreach, right, but the whole point is to do this right at the outset. We've had some actually very good examples of when early engagement has worked. I can think of one with the Alzheimer's charity and a particular drug that was being used, and therefore, if you like, the whole assessment and communication was handled in a very much a partnership way. So I think there's more to do, being explicit about which charities are involved. Sometimes it's not that easy if there are multiple patient groups, as with valproate, but always to think what we're uniquely able to do because of that incredibly important outreach capability to reach those patients and the healthcare professionals who are involved in their care. I think the other element that we've got to always have in mind is donations, and clearly charities, will need those funding sources, but transparency is a great help there, so that clearly when everything's out in the open, then it's quite clear how funding is accessed. But we all know we have to live in the real world, and as long as there's transparency and there are, if you like, good checks and balances in the system, I think our overall gain from working with the charities far outweighs any of the risks.
Okay, that's great, thank you. Okay, the next question, Rachel, please.
Next question, again, picks up the theme about safety and engagement. So the questioner is asking whether there are other major issues around patient safety and patient engagement that the public don't hear about, because it's always either sodium valproate mesh or isotretinoin. So the questioner is asking whether there are other issues that could be quoted.
Okay, June, could I maybe ask you to come to that, please?
Absolutely, and this is something that the Cumberland report did identify when they set out to listen to patients and the public. It wasn't just the main areas of concern about harm from medicines or medical devices. There were other patients who came forward too. Our patient reference group that I've highlighted that the DHSC has set up includes, for example, patients whose families or family members of patients affected by the fluoroquinolone antibiotics, which is another area of risk, but obviously benefits from an important therapeutic area. So yes, there are other issues and very much in sight. I think there are areas, for example, that while they're being looked at, you might have heard of the number of menstrual disorders that are being reported for some of the people who've had COVID vaccination. So we engage with lay and patient representatives there. So it is a running theme for all of our safety investigations, and as necessary, we're able to make sure that the quotable issues are ready for public communication once we've done a full assessment. So perhaps check out Cumberland Review. They've got some of the main quotable patient concerns in that report.
And just building on that, June, if I may, could I just ask how we go around communicating these safety issues to the public and to healthcare professionals when we've identified an issue?
Yes, and I think probably Rachel will have quite a lot to say. As we go through our transformation, we're bringing on board the skills in risk communication. I think very often it's a case of early highlighting, for example, with the clots, with the AZ vaccine, and then a much more mature communication once we have quantified the risk. So always focusing on what patients and the public need to look out for. So there's a way of doing this that brings in early knowledge where we've still got uncertainty, but it is very important that people are aware of the assessment that's being done, and then a much more refined, better characterization of the risk, quantification, and the ability to take steps to minimize it. That's using a bit of regulatory jargon, but it helps to perhaps look at the flow of communications in a way that links with how we're approaching it, to tease out the value that we're getting. And finally, to highlight the real importance of reports from patients.
Yeah.
They have been absolutely invaluable in characterizing the risk, and also in how that risk can be best managed in a way that patients find risk proportionate. Sorry about the jargon, but it helps to characterize the way we communicate. Chairman, I'm sure Rachel might want to say a word about that. Vigilance and comms, colleagues, hand in hand.
Yeah, I'm trying not to turn the tables on Rachel too much, but Rachel, is there anything else you could add in terms of the way we communicate on other products apart from COVID and the Cumberland products?
Yeah, I think June summarised very well. I would just add that we use both direct communication methods, communication via the media and social media, and also through relevant charities and patient groups, depending on what the issue is that we're communicating. And the other point to pick up, I think, is as we move forward, really focusing hard on making sure that our risk communications are very understandable and clear for patients, so that it's clear what they need to do if they need to take action, and very much looking at language and tone at the moment to enhance our risk communications further.
Yeah, and then of course there's the safety alerts that would go out to healthcare professionals through either the NHS or directly as well. So I think it's very clear the agency is responsible for all products, not just, we tend to focus on some of the ones that are very topical at the moment, such as COVID and the Cumberland products, but we are responsible for all products. So we're very clear about that. Okay, Rachel, I'm sorry to turn the tables there. Can we ask another question?
It's okay. Yeah, so then there is a question that was sparked, I think, by the discussion on the culture and diversity paper. So there was a number of points made about different aspects of diversity, and the questioner has really raised a specific point about geography, actually, and provinces versus London centric, whether we think that would be a good diversity aspect to consider as well.
Okay, that's a very interesting point. John Fundry is the board sponsor, responsible for HR as well as finance. Any thoughts on diversity of geography?
So I agree, actually. I mean, it's interesting that the civil service surveys actually sort of measure a sort of range of dimensions of this. So geography is one, social background, family background, etc. So we have access to that data. But yeah, I think it is particularly relevant, particularly when we look at our future ways of working approach. Do we actually need to be based in Canary Wharf in London totally? So it's a very valid question.
Yeah, it is. And just as another example, just going back to the non-executive director recruitment, I was actually taking great concern around geographical spread. So they weren't just London-based applicants that we were considering. Because I think actually there is something around geographical experience when you bring in independent expertise into an organisation, whether it's as a non-executive director or expert committees. So I think breadth in that sense is very important. Okay, Rachel, another question.
Yeah, so a final question for today, as a couple of the pre-submitted questions were actually very technical regulatory questions. So we have arranged for those to receive direct responses on the technical issues that were raised rather than picking up at this meeting. So the final question that's come through today is it's more of a comment really about, again, picking up the theme on diversity and how that spreads across all angles of our work. But the comment is particularly about the public consultative forum, and the person that's made this comment is saying that, you know, medical charities struggle to attract people from diverse backgrounds. People struggle to recruit to trials that are aimed specifically at ethnic minorities. And I think it's really a question about the need to attain diversity with the public consultative forum and how we might be going about that.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, actually. June, have you got any first thoughts on that? Because I suspect this is part of how we arrange our patient and public involvement and engagement as we go forward. But any initial thoughts?
I think as we get the results of our big survey, again, we will test, are we reaching? And if we haven't, we absolutely need to make sure that we do. We've come from a heritage, I think, as you mentioned, Stephen, of taking very great care that our expert independent committee members come from a diverse background, but that needs to be, as John Fundry has said, part of everything. So my first stop will be have the responses to that outreach, that survey and consultation exercise fully captured a diverse input. Otherwise, the strategy that we'll shape will not meet all of those needs. During COVID, we've learned a great deal, and I think you know, colleagues are aware, we've had to actually go out. You know, there's nothing quite like going to where there are a mix of cultures and communities to enrich the input that you have and the understanding of people's concerns. So I suspect, as you say yourself, Stephen, that the board will need to embrace some of the needs to go out there rather than always expect to behave in a London-centric way. A number of strands, but I think it will start with the results of our public consultation.
Yeah, I think that's right. And involving diverse populations, I think, you know, when we think about some of our combined ways of working on clinical trials and making sure that they're representative, you know, when we think about our innovation licensing access pathway, you know, making sure there's a diverse patient input into those particular decisions. Diversity is not just an internal issue, it's absolutely got to be the way that we operate to represent and to support and you know, the wider population that we serve. So I think that's very clear. Okay, well, thank you, Rachel, for the questions, and thank you to everybody who actually raised them. As you've probably noticed through most of the conversation, there's a number of people who've been commenting that this will be their last meeting. And so I just wanted before we close, just sort of say a word of special thanks. As non-executive directors, we have you know, limited terms of office, and that's a healthy thing because it enables that you know, to retain our independence. We don't become too imbued within the organisation, and therefore, you know, as a term of office, you know, then it allows us to bring new people in to keep that independent perspective and that independent support and that independent challenge to keep the board you know, discussions real and robust. So as 4 of our non-executive directors are reaching the end of their terms and will be leaving on the 31st of August. So this is effectively their last board meeting. And the first of those is Professor David Webb from Edinburgh. So there's our geographical diversity in action, as it were. David's been with us for 8 years. He's not only Deputy Chair of the Board, but he's chaired the National Institute of Biological Standards and Control Scientific Advisory Committee, very, very ably. He's been a great supporter of NIBS. There's no question. I can see Mark nodding to that particular point. He's obviously chaired the Remuneration Committee in the past. He's actually been a member of the Patient Safety Engagement Committee and a founding member of that as well. So, David, you know, you've had many responsibilities over that 8 years. We're very grateful for your significant wisdom and thoughts. So, just I'd like to record in the minutes, please, Natalie, our great thanks to David. I think the second person who will be leaving is Dr. Barbara Bannister. Now, Barbara's been involved with the agency for some 25 years in a variety of guises through a number of different expert committees. She just doesn't look old enough, does she, really, to be fair? But Barbara, you know, you've been, again, a member of, you've been with the board now for 6 years. You're currently a member of the Audit and Risk Assurance Committee, but you've done a sterling job when it comes to medical revalidation and conflicts of interest in particular. And we're very, very grateful for your wisdom and breadth of responsibilities and input. So it's always been appreciated. We're also losing Professor Bruce Campbell, you know, our resident expert and passionate advocate for medical devices, but also patient involvement and engagement, you know, and Bruce, we've always valued your input. Again, you've been on the board for 6 years and we really appreciate that. And then the fourth member who will come to the end of their term is Anthony Rogers. And Anthony, you know, You've certainly been the founding chair, not only of one of the nice directorates, certainly back in the day, but in this board, you've been a member of the Audit and Risk Assurance Committee, which Michael referenced. You've also been the founding chair of the Organisational Development and Remuneration Committee. We absolutely valued your championship of change, communications and CPRD. And again, you've made in a short time a lot of contribution there. So again, I would just like to formally thank each and every one of you for your significant contribution to the board. And if we can record that in the minutes for the public record, please, Natalie, I'd be very grateful. I see David wants to come back and disagree with me, which is his way. But yeah, David, do you want to make a comment?
Yes, I'm not going to disagree with you on this occasion. As it's my last, I'll be very positive. It's been, I'm sure I'm speaking for all of us who are leaving the board. It's been a fantastic honour and privilege working with the board, and for me working with NIBSC, in my case for the last 8 years. It's clear that recent times have been a little challenging, but I am confident, and I'm sure we all are, that under your leadership of the board and June's leadership of MHRA, that transition to life as a sovereign regulator will be successful. And I wish you all well, and everyone I've worked with at MHRA and on the board. It's been a fantastic experience.
Okay, well, thank you, David. I really appreciate your words there. Obviously, then the next question is going to be, what next? So we've been through an extensive recruitment exercise. The recommendations are with the ministers at the moment to consider the outcome of the recent recruitment process. We're aiming to be able to make 4 new non-executive director appointments with a diversity, as I said earlier, of thought, of protected characteristics, and also hopefully geography too, from the 1st of September. So for the next public board meeting, there'll be some new faces around the table, and we'll take the opportunity to introduce people at that particular point. So, June, I can see that you want to make a comment.
Well, Chairman, I just think the beautiful words you've just said, just perhaps I could follow briefly on behalf of the executive colleagues and, say some words of really sincere thanks for everything and the immense contribution Barbara, Bruce, Antony and David have made. I think, as David has just said, we've been sailing in some choppy waters, and I think the winds of change are blowing hard. But absolutely throughout, our non-executive have done us proud. You've given us your navigation skills, and that word steadfast has come up, steadfast hands on our ship's wheel. I think your generosity in sharing your experiences has been of unique value. And I think you've said it all, Stephen. Barbara's wisdom on all matters public health, Bruce for flying the flag for medical devices and patient involvement, and Tony's tremendous insights on organisational change, and David's, huge support for the science at NIBSC and a physician's guiding hand. So we've done our course corrections, as we like to call them now. You've supported and shaped our future, and patients and the public will be the better for it. So it's just really to add a word of our own thanks from the executive. And we always will be a family. I'm sure that's what we will rely on for the future. Those contributions are hugely valued. We're family, and we know you'll be there if ever. Thank you very much, Stephen.
That's very, very heartfelt comments, June. So thank you for that. So as far as the next board meeting is concerned, so for members of the public, the next meeting will be on Tuesday, the 21st of September. Now, what we're hoping to do there is for the board members to have a face-to-face in-person meeting for the first time for 18 months. But our plan is also to be able to live stream the meeting so that members of the public don't have to travel to London, to make it as accessible as possible so that we can hopefully, technology allowing, be able to live stream the meeting virtually and still ask questions. So that's going to be a challenge for John Quinn and Carly and their teams, but I'm sure they're up to it. But that's certainly the intention. Obviously, if the situation with COVID changes, then obviously, or the technology doesn't work, we might have to readjust. But that's my ambition. So on that particular note, 21st of September will be the next time we meet in public. I'd like to thank everyone for their contribution today. I'd like to thank everyone from the external environment and members of the public for asking questions, participating in the meeting. I'd like to thank everyone for their involvement. And on that basis, I'd like to close the meeting and to wish you all well and have a nice summer. Cheers for now. Bye-bye.